The media, composed of actors, singers, authors, and the internet, are constantly attacking both Christianity and the Bible. One of the favorite ways are through biblical contradictions or biblical difficulties. These opponents of Christianity often use them in their attempts to discredit Christianity. Sometimes these attacks undermine the faith of Christians who either don't understand the issues or don't have the resources to deal with them. Opponents of Christianity will cite what they consider a biblical contradiction or difficulty by comparing one verse to another or more that seems to disagree with the first.
Bart Erhman attempted to demonstrate that the Gospels of Mark and Luke stand in hopeless contradictions to one another with respect to the death of Jesus Christ.
In Mark's Gospel, for example, Jesus goes to his death in deep agony over what's happening to him, and doesn't seem to understand why it's happening to him. At the end,
conversely, says,
read Luke's Gospel, he's not in agony at all.
To suggest that in Mark's account of the crucifixion Jesus doesn't seem to understand what is happening to him is more than a little weird. Even a child reading through Mark's words knows better than to think such a thing. Who can forget Christ's defense of Mary after she's broken an alabaster jar and poured perfume on the head of Jesus Christ?
She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial.
Or his anguished prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will.
Indeed, as Mark's Gospel makes crystal clear, Jesus knew precisely what would happen to him and he knew precisely why. As he explained it during the Last Supper.
This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said to them.
Or as he put it just prior to entering Jerusalem, the Son of Man came.
And to give his life as a ransom for many.
Jesus had in fact repeatedly predicted his suffering, his life, his death, his resurrection, and to say otherwise is both an insult to Christ and common sense. Furthermore, it's almost beyond belief that a scholar with a kind of prestige that Bart Erhman has wrestling with the text of Scripture would conclude that Christ in Luke's Gospel, as Erhman put it, is,
read Luke's Gospel, he's not in agony at all.
As documented by Dr. Luke, Christ's torment started in the Garden of Gethsemane after the emotional Last Supper. There Jesus experienced a medical condition known as hematidrosis. Tiny capillaries in the sweat glands ruptured, mixing sweat and blood. As a result, Christ's skin became extremely fragile. As Luke's Gospel says,
being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground.
Subsequently he's arrested, he's beaten and he's executed in grotesque and humiliating fashion. The Roman system of crucifixion has been fine-tuned to produce maximum pain. In fact, the word excruciating, literally out of the cross, had to be invented to fully codify its horror. To tell us that in Luke's Gospel Jesus is not in agony at all, takes more than just a little gall on the part of Erhman. Finally, allow me to drive a nail into the heart of Erhman's methodology. Unless biographers such as Mark and Luke say exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, Erhman stands ready to crucify them on the pretext of contradiction. Here's how he restates the shop-worn charge.
And what people have done is they've taken Mark's Gospel and Luke's Gospel and combined them together into one big Gospel, which is unlike either Mark or Luke.
That is, of course, precisely what biographers do, and for good reason. The very nature of biography is to pick and choose elements of a congruent story that one wishes to emphasize. As such, no single biographer captures every detail of a subject's life and experience. Indeed, one of the most amazing realities with respect to the composite biography presented through the Gospel writers is that they were empowered to present a living portrait of the most interesting, complex, and significant being who has ever walked among us, and that without contradiction or the possible charge of collusion, and they do it with such eloquence and irradiation. Is there a contradiction here? The answer is there is no contradiction. Together the accounts along with John and Matthew give us the whole story, wonderfully balanced, glorious, and ultimately a story by which we can be saved.